we were talking about as writers, the benefits of writing in a series. And last week, Lewis talked about how a lot of times as a writer, if you write, say, a 5-book series, by book 5, you've lost a rather large chunk of your readership. And so with the rise of more serialized fiction and the rise of things like not just Vella, but you've got things like the Murderbot series that have shown the value of novellas and shorter length stuff. What do you guys feel about what is the place of the novella in the market currently, and is there for longer series especially should more writers be considering the novella?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's the future. I really feel with the way things are turning out, authors need to be able to produce and produce on the regular. And so, they need to be able to put out like 3, 4, 5 books a year if you're an indie author. And so going shorter ensures that. And you are keeping your readership regularly updated, as opposed to them having to wait 1 or 2 years for your book to come out. You can give them, you can publish it, say, in volumes. You can do it in novella length books, or you can you can pare books down to a shorter length, and you can put out a lot of books at one time. Is basically what I'm saying. You could do, say, 6 a year, and not only are you maximizing your profits by having 6 sellable books as opposed to one. You sell each of those 6 at $2.99 a piece instead of one book at $4.99. You're maximizing your ability to sell. These are all good things. The shorter length means that you don't have to juggle so much plot. The whole thing. There's just an endless amount of reasons why the novella or novella, however you want to say it, is the thing. The problem is hammering out what is a novella, what, like, in terms of word count. See, I go with the SIFWA guidelines, and so everything, anything from like 17,501 up to 40,000 words is a novella. But I see a lot of people play around with it, and they'll say as much as 50,000 in some cases. But it really, it's really.
So Gail, you've got your nearest series of books. It's currently you have 4 books out in that series, right? And that's obviously those are all novellas. So how do you feel like if let's say, if you can kind of imagine for a moment, if you'd written the nearest books as, say, just a duology or even one enormous book, how do you think that would have affected the writing of it? In other words, did you see benefits? And kind of getting to what Lewis just said about the plotting and everything becomes way more manageable if you're doing novellas versus, these ginormous novels.
Yeah, I agree. This is a novella renaissance that we're going through right now. And because it would have, I don't think we would have been able to accomplish 4 books because we would have gotten lost in the plotting and lost in the characterization. Turning out something, and we're shooting for like between 30 and 35 per book. So we can tell a good, tight story, and then the next book can often continue that story. In fact, the last 2 in a 4-book series are literally, okay, we're on this subsea station, boom, it ends on the cliffhanger, boom, we finish it up in the next book. And we're able to turn one out in a month or 2. Right. And also other projects, which is what, to me, is the great benefit, that you can work on that, what's 30,000 words, and also have the other projects going on at the same time. So I think it's a much tighter story and a better story and a better way to write.
I also want to make another point here. Amazon is calling their serialized app Vella. I think they're trying to subliminally tell us this is the length we want. And the novella is, in terms of adapting to for a screenplay, the novella is the perfect length. You have basically one main plot, and you can usually fit in one subplot in your story. and that's about what you have with a feature-length
Mhm.
film, a 90-minute,
Yeah.
feature-length film. And I've said almost from the beginning that I really feel like Amazon is doing with Vella what Wattpad did with its stuff, which is mining the content on its page for content deals with various companies. However, Amazon, I think, wants to have first choice. They want to, but we have to show that we can generate an audience before I think they're going to start like pulling people in and doing deals. But yeah, and the novella length is, like I said, it's perfect for it, for adapting.
Charlotte, do you want to jump in just for a second? Because I'm curious. You have novella length stuff out there, right? I mean, what is your do you find novella is a nice length for you for just telling a good story, or are you more into, or is novella not as much your cup of tea?
My things tend to be short. I've written more flash fiction than anything else. Um, and I tend to write short stories. So, uh, and I have a couple of novels that are in the somewhere between 50 and 100,000, depending on which one you look at. Um, I don't think I've ever written anything novella length.
Huh.
Because I
I've got
haven't written as much as you guys have. And like I
I've
said, a
got
lot of what
five or
I've written has
six.
been really short.
Mhm.
500 words, 1,000, 2,000, maybe 5,000. So,
It's interesting though, because you have like the fairy godmother novel, right? That's probably a full length. So it's interesting that you've got either ends of the spectrum, but just not that
right.
in the
But I
middle.
have two sets of short stories that are between 3 and 5 or 6,000 words about her. So
Mm-hmm.
But so I made a book that had three stories in it, but the whole book is 50 pages. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, so I kind of don't. I haven't tried doing something that length.
Well, now is a good time for me to plug the idea that I am currently putting together a Vella for the purposes of learning how to write the novella. I'm
Hmm.
going to be
Oh,
I'm going to be releasing that
idea.
probably either in February, or sorry, late February or early March, possibly. And yeah, I mean, it involves the plotting and the creation of the thing, because I've written like five or six now, and
Uh-huh.
it just is the ideal length. And like Gail said, you can turn these out really fast. They have the
Mhm.
same impact as a novel. Now, do you get to live in the character in the world for 900 pages? No, you don't. But you can have incredibly enjoyable uh, experiences, and you don't have to worry about a bunch of different, you seriously, you can do a really long story with just a main plot and that's it, or you can do a main plot and then a subplot, and there
Mhm.
and you're out, man. It's fast, and you can do that, and then you could have other projects, because like Gail's talking about, man, you can be writing that and working on three or four other things on the side,
Yeah.
just
Yep.
keeping that productivity going. And I can promise you, the audience will eventually gravitate toward that sort of thing. Right now, especially in science fiction and fantasy, everyone believes in these doorstops, but we're seeing it trending down. We're seeing more books coming down to the level of about 60 to 75,000. And I can tell you they're going to get shorter than that too, because as people are realizing they have to write a lot in order to survive, their stuff is going to get shorter, and the readers are going to come because they're going to want their fix.
And the only like serious criticism I've always felt about in terms of when people say, "Oh, novels are better than novellas," is only really applicable if you're talking about a standalone novella, where you want to spend more time, as you alluded to, Lewis. Like readers want to spend more time in that world, and so
Yeah,
that's one reason they like the doorstop. But if I'm a good writer and I can produce three 30,000 word novellas, I mean that
in a
will have
year.
the same a year that has the same
Mhm.
effect as in terms of the reader can spend time in that world. And I know,
Yeah,
and I know I've mentioned Murderbot as a great example, but is one of my favorite series, but that series is every bit as much, I mean, you can immerse yourself in that world every bit as much of as in a traditional doorstop style sci-fi or
Yes.
fantasy.
Yes.
My three main series that I'm writing all contain. They're all the majority of the books are going to be novella length, simply because it is. It's like you get that story and then boom, it's out there, and they can be reading that while you're working on the next one, and you can just keep a constant stream. And it's like that. It's like that with the Hardwood Case Files. I've got a science fiction series about a mercenary and a robot called Achilles and Swiss. I'm working on finally going to put the second one together on that one. And then I've got another one I'm about to release. It's a fantasy, like kind of like Dickensian fantasy type thing. And I mean, it's just, and I mean, these are like, yeah,
Don't you guys
20,000,
think
30,000 words, and then boom, they're out, man.
in a way though, and in a way, don't you guys think it almost shows greater respect for the reader? Because when you're writing a novella, as the writer, every word has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
You don't have time for filler crap, for unimportant side plots. Like, everything has to matter and everything has to be well written. Whereas I think the tendency in some of these doorstop novels, it's like, well, I'll throw in some world building here, world building there, that bloats the story and it doesn't really do much for the story.
And that the world building thing kind of gets blown out of proportion after a while. It really does. I mean, you're just like, okay, wow, so this race of people have different colored toenails, and like, who cares? Only the cosplayers.
And it's fun to make readers kind of infer stuff and try to piece things together rather than just regurgitating everything that is a writer that's might be in your head about that world.
Yes.
Too.
And going back to what Charlotte was talking about, see, everything Charlotte was saying was she works with an economy of words. Her stories are brief. She's doing what we're all supposed to be doing, which is making our stories as short as possible. I don't know where we got into this idea that it has to be 210,000 words. I rarely read books that long nowadays. If I see them on a bookshelf and it's a big fat book, I don't mess with it. I don't have the time for it.
But Lewis, Brandon Sanderson. Sorry.
He's the greatest writer of all time. Yeah. Oh, don't get me started. More power to him. I mean, I obviously that guy's who I want to be when I grow up, because he can turn out those giant novels like on a wheel. I wish I could do that, and I would cut them down to about 7 volumes each.
And I like if I could kidnap Brandon Sanderson and put him in a room with us, and force him, give him a truth serum so he would tell us his honest truth. I would kind of ask him, like, do you think some of your trilogies or whatever would be better stories if you'd written them in novellas instead of in doorstop form?
Okay, but that's the thing though. Sanderson has a couple of novellas out.
He does.
Yeah.
In fact, he's won awards. He's won awards with some of his novellas too.
Yeah. Yes, he has. I mean, everybody's going to it. So if a guy like Sanderson, who's writing these giant books, if he's going to novellas to tell certain stories, I really feel like that's an indicator that we're going to start moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Really do. I mean, and we're going to be going back to the days of like the little spinner rack looking paperbacks. I mean, nice thin, spare novels. I feel better whenever I'm writing, if I'm using brevity as like one of my guiding lights,
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we got a good. I think we covered that pretty well.